A very warm and slightly wet welcome, disappointingly, to Havana. But this is exciting. This is Facebook Live from Havana, Cuba, for BBC News. I'm Lawrence Pollard. Frequently, as part of my regular job, I talk to our correspondent here down the line. I've actually had the privilege of coming here, standing on the roof of the BBC office. What you'll see behind us is basically the main harbour in Havana, and who you'll see next to me is Will Grant, our man in Havana, as I unamusingly refer to him. Will, we're here looking at all those changes that you've been kind of intimately joined up with and covering. And one thing we want to talk about is the whole business of the internet and the availability of the internet. You know, people have their preconceptions of Cuba. There isn't a great deal of free media, open media. Obviously, people all have their own opinions. There's only a couple of newspapers. It's not the sort of rich media landscape you expect. And yet, we have the internet. Now, we have the internet here because we're on top of your office.
Exactly.
But what other internet would be available now or has been recently for people here?
Well, the government has been opening a whole series of what they call hotspots, which are basically Wi-Fi, in public access Wi-Fi spots, not just here in Havana where there are quite a few, but across the island. So public squares and various different places that people can come, sit down, open their laptops, switch on their phones and contact their families in Miami, around the world, get online, check their email.
It's a very public place to do it.
It is.
But I suppose life is quite public here. People live out in the streets,
Well,
don't
this
they?
is it. Right down this road that you can see running behind us, down on the waterfront. That's the Malecon, Havana's iconic waterfront. The plan is to make that entire stretch of road a public access Wi-Fi spot. And that'll be interesting because in the evenings people do sit out there and that's a place they go. Of course there's a push for people to have it in their homes, but for now it's in public spaces. The government say they do intend to do that in parts of Old Havana, make sure that people can eventually start having it at home. But of course this is a conversation that's much later than everybody else. And Raul Castro and his government are quite strong on the fact that they think that ubiquitous internet everywhere is not just a good thing, that, you know, other countries are used to it, they think that this is a human right. They don't. And they think that too many other governments and countries have sort of forgotten some of the dangers of internet being broadly available.
The dangers of too much information. I mean, we are in a very privileged position. I mean, I woke up this morning, I was looking at BBC World, CNN, I can check the news from around the world. That's not available to most ordinary Cubans. In terms of what is available from a hotspot, what would they be able to find? Because I got the impression from looking at the hotspot that because the Cuban experience is so much about families that have been sundered by history, you know, different sides of the Florida Strait and so on, it's a social thing as much as an information thing, which surprised me.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think by and large people do use it to communicate more than anything else. The vastly the most popular thing is Facebook. People use Facebook. Most Cubans who are online have Facebook accounts. So, you know, that's interesting, isn't it? That people, you know, are aware that what you do when you have the internet is get onto Facebook.
And one thing also, I mean, Facebook is an American company. There is this trade embargo. So are there little chinks, you know, Facebook is allowed to operate here, or people find sort of ghost networks off the island? How does that work?
Well, I think, I actually don't know the specifics when it comes to Facebook, but certainly a good example is Skype.
Right.
And that would be in defiance of the embargo. So people there absolutely can't get online through Skype because Skype themselves, as far as I understand, aren't allowing the software to work.
Because there are limitations on doing business in Cuba. Absolutely. I mean, we've had one question posted up here. I mean, Victoria asks, did anyone consult with locals about all these changes? The idea about how the internet can change culture. Was there a big pressure? Because when Cubans didn't have the internet, they obviously knew what was going on. But in a place like this, how is that pressure expressed?
Well, the government would suggest that everything is grassroots upwards, in the sense that there are structures, neighbourhood structures in which to put forward your complaints, and that somehow would make it to the door of the office of Raul Castro. Obviously, there aren't lobbyists or pressure groups that there might be in other countries. That said, they are very, very well calibrated to the feelings on the streets. You know, they've had 57 years of experience at doing that. And they know just exactly where things are beginning to get at, you know, the frustrations are beginning to bubble over. They know that young people have left the island in, you know, huge numbers over the years. Not just in search of the internet, but in search of employment opportunities and so on.
So the government is able to present this as we're doing what the